Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In the last two videos, we had a discussion on the lesson The Rise of Nationalism in Europe part 1 and 2. In this part, we'll discuss the age of revolutions 1830 to 1848, romantic imagination and the national feeling, hunger, hardship and popular revolt, liberal revolutions, etc. During the period of 1830 to 48, Europe witnessed great tension and unrest. On the one side, conservatives were trying to become more powerful, and on the other side, the revolutionaries were attempting hard to bring liberalism and nationalism in Europe. Revolutionaries, who were mainly comprised of educated middle class allies such as professors, school teachers, clerks, and members of commercial middle classes, started revolutionary activities in many regions of Europe, such as the Italian and German state, the provinces of Ottoman Empire, Ireland, and Poland. The first incident took place in France in July 1830. The Bourbon kings, who had been restored to power during the conservative reaction after 1815, were now overthrown by liberal revolutionaries who installed a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe at its head. The liberal revolutionaries overthrew the Bourbon kings and at its place a constitutional monarch with Louis Philippe as its head was established. The July Revolution led to an uprising in Brussels which resulted in the separation of Belgium from the United Kingdom of the Netherlands in October 4, 1830. Now, let's see a major event that served for inculcating the nationalist feeling among the educated elite across Europe, that is, the Greek War of Independence. Greece had been part of the Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. The growth of revolutionary nationalism in Europe sparked off a struggle for independence amongst the Greeks which began in 1821. A major event that served for inculcating the nationalist feeling among the educated elite across Europe was the Greek War of Independence. Greece was under the Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. The independence struggle of Greece began in 1821. The nationalists in Greece were supported by other Greeks who were living in exile. Even the people from West Europe who had sympathy for the Greek culture also came forward for their support. Various artists and poets also supported the Greek struggle against the Muslim Empire. Ottoman Empire was a Muslim empire. The English poet Lord Byron not only organized funds for the Greek struggle but also went to participate in the war where he died of fever in 1824. Finally, a Treaty of Constantinople was signed in 1832 that recognized Greece as an independent nation. The Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. What is the importance of Constantinople? Constantinople was the Ottoman capital until 1923. Capital then moved to Ankara and Constantinople was renamed as Istanbul. Now Constantinople is known as Istanbul. As we have already read that various artists and poets had also participated in revolutionary activities for bringing liberalism and nationalism in Europe. But what was their contribution and how is Romanticism connected with it? Let's find out. The romantic imagination and national feeling. The notion of nationalism did not come because of wars and territorial expansion. Culture also played an important role in creating the idea of the nation. Art and poetry, stories and music helped express and shape nationalist feeling. What is Romanticism? Romanticism was a cultural movement which sought to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiment. Romantic artists and poets generally criticized the glorification of reason and science and focused instead on emotions, intuitions, and mystical feelings. The cultural movement carried by the poets, writers, and artists came to be known as Romanticism. Romantic artists and poets were the criticizers of reason and science. To inculcate a sense of a shared collective heritage and common cultural past, they tried to focus on emotions, intuitions, and mystical feelings. German philosopher John Gottfried Herder claimed that true German culture was to be discovered among the common people. It was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of the nation was popularized. Collecting and recording these forms of folk culture was essential to the project of nation building. The emphasis on vernacular language and the collection of various folk tales, folk poems, etc. served two purposes at a time. One was recovering an ancient national spirit, and another was to create awareness about nationalism among the illiterate countrymen. This proved to be suitable in the case of Poland. Poland was partitioned at the end of the 18th century by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Even though Poland no longer existed as an independent territory, national feelings were kept alive through music and language. Artists like Karol Kerpinski, for example, celebrated the national struggle through his operas and music, turning folk dances like the Polonaise and Mazurka into nationalist symbols. Not only poems and stories played a crucial role in developing the national sentiments among the people, but language also played a greater part in it. Let's see. Language also played an important role in developing nationalist sentiments. After Russian occupation, the Polish language was forced out of schools and the Russian language was imposed everywhere. When Russia occupied Poland, it forcefully imposed the Russian language in schools and churches. Polish language was stopped. So in 1831, an armed rebellion against Russian rule took place, which was however crushed by the Russian rule. Following this, many members of the clergy in Poland began to use language as a weapon of national resistance. Polish was used for church gatherings and all religious instruction. As a result, a large number of priests and bishops were put in jail or sent to Siberia by the Russian authorities as punishment for their refusal to preach in Russian. The use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of struggle against the Russian dominance. Now let's see the next part, hunger, hardship and popular revolt. Though 1830s is recalled as year of revolutionary attempts in Europe, it is also recalled for the hardships and the hunger that struck Europe. Let's have a look at this. Europe had to face severe economic hardships during the 1830s. During the first half of the 19th century, the population gradually increased in Europe. The problems of unemployment became common in Europe. People of rural areas started migrating to the cities in search of work. This also results into setting up of various slum areas in these cities. There was a rapid increase in population during the first half of the 19th century, which led to widespread unemployment. The unemployed rural people migrated from villages to cities for earning bread. Cheap machine-made goods from England made impossible for the small producers to compete. Small producers in towns were often faced with stiff competition from imports of cheap machine-made goods from England, where industrialization was more advanced than on the continent. This was especially so in textile production. In those regions of Europe where the aristocracy still enjoyed power, peasants struggled under the burden of feudal dues and obligations. The rise of food prices led to worsening of the situation. In the year 1848, food shortage and the increasing problem of unemployment resulted in demonstrations by the peasants in Paris. It led to the erection of barricades in the city and Louis Philippe had to leave the city. A National Assembly announced a republic. It granted voting rights, suffrage to all males above the age of 21 and guaranteed the right to work. For this, national workshops were set up to provide employment to the public. Another uprising was seen in 1845 in Silesia. The weavers of Silesia revolted against the contractors. Contractors were those people who used to provide the weavers with the raw materials so that they could turn them into finished products. The payments made to the weavers by these contractors were reduced to a very low amount. This reduction in payment was a reason of this revolt. So on 4th June at 2 p.m. a large crowd of weavers emerged from their house and marched in pairs up to the houses of their contractor demanding higher wages. They were mistreated by the contractor. This led to the forceful entry of the weavers into the contractor's house, where they destroyed and damaged almost everything. The contractor fled with his family to a nearby village where he was not given shelter by anyone. After a gap of 24 hours, he returned back with an army, and in the exchange that followed, 11 weavers were shot. Now, let's see the next part, 1848, the Revolution of the Liberals. Till now, we have read about the revolution done by the peasants, weavers and the poets or artists. But parallel to these groups, some more groups had also initiated a revolution in their own way. That is, educated middle class of European countries. Events of February 1848 in France had brought about the abdication of the monarch, and a republic based on universal male suffrage had been proclaimed. As we know that the February Revolution of 1848 in France had resulted in the removal of the monarch and establishment of a republic with universal male suffrage. Still, there were many parts in Europe that were not yet declared as independent nation state. They were Germany, Italy, Poland, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, etc. Liberal middle classes, comprising of both men and women, started demanding a constitution with unification. They demanded for the nation state based on parliamentary principles with a constitution, freedom of the press and freedom of association. In the German regions, a large number of political associations whose members were middle-class professionals, businessmen, and prosperous artisans came together in the city of Frankfurt and decided to vote for an all-German National Assembly. In German region, a group of political associations that consisted of middle-class professionals, businessmen and rich artisans gathered in the city of Frankfurt and decided to vote for an all-German National Assembly. On 18th May 1848, 831 elected representatives gathered at Church of St. Paul to take their places in the Frankfurt Parliament. They had drafted a constitution for German nation which was to be headed by a monarch as per the parliament. When the deputies offered the crown, which was subject to some terms, to Frederick William IV, King of Prussia, he not only rejected it but also joined other monarchs to oppose the elected assembly. The parliament never paid attention towards the demands of peasants, therefore, it never got any support from them. Finally, the assembly was forced to disband with the help of troops. Though conservative forces were able to suppress liberal movements in 1848, they could not restore the old order. Monarchs were beginning to realize that the cycles of revolution and repression could not be ended by granting concession to the liberal nationalist revolutionaries. So after 1848, the monarchs tried to introduce some measures which were already introduced in Western Europe before 1815. This was abolition of serfdom and bonded labor, which laid the foundation stone of making of Germany and Italy. In next video, we'll see the making of Germany and Italy. Now, let's see some questions and answers related to this topic.